Is this working okay? Microphone? Yep. That's great. All right, if we're technically ready, then I'll begin. All right. My name's Paul Hardy. I'm an ABAP programmer, and I'm not ashamed. And I normally work in Australia, but I've been in Germany the last few years, and I always try to tie my talk with what's gone before. And both speakers thus far have been talking about moving outside of one's comfort zone. And this is what's going to happen to ABAP programmers, whether they like it or not. And so this is the future of ABAP programming. Now, the central message of the presentation is that ABAP is not dead. A lot of people think because of all the cool new languages, such as the Ruby on Rails and the various versions of JavaScript that are like deemed as more sexy and the future of programming, that ABAP's seen as really, really old-fashioned, and people who program in ABAP are dinosaurs and they're going to die. And luckily for ABAP programmers, SAP feels somewhat differently on this matter. And I'm going to talk about various initiatives that are coming from SAP and elsewhere to drag ABAP kicking and screaming into the future. What you'll hear today is the mandatory 10 seconds on my company, because they do pay for my hotel and things, so I might as well give them something in return. Talk about why ABAP needs to evolve in the first place, the problem, and then 3 different initiatives coming out of SAP in regard to the modernization of ABAP and how those 3 initiatives all fit seamlessly together. Now, I work for Heidelberg Cement, which is a cement company based in Heidelberg. That's not a huge shock. We make building products like ready-mix concrete, cement, aggregates, but you don't really care about that. The important bit, which is relevant to yourselves, is that we use SAP for all aspects of our business. Secondly, like many, many companies, we are run basically ZAP. 99% of the transactions start with a Z. There's bucket loads of Z code everywhere. And thirdly, we, like most companies, are all too horribly aware that eventually we're going to have to move off the ECC6 and move on to S/4HANA, which is no small undertaking. But the point is that my company is in the same boat as virtually all organizations running it. So it's not an abstract problem. It's a very real one that my organization and all fit. The problem is nothing new. It's been there since time immemorial. And that is that there's more and more changes coming in you can possibly handle. You've got 500,000 change requests coming in from the business and as the outside world changes. And the bottleneck is how fast can you get them into the live system? And the problem there, as you can see with the atom bomb explosions, is that you try your best to avoid breaking anything when it goes into production. That's absolutely obvious. Either the new thing doesn't work or what the change that you've put in breaks something else. This is really the bottleneck, because if you could be sure that everything worked, then this bit could be made a little bit wider. But in actual fact, because we're so scared, we have a little bottleneck here and we try to restrict the amount of changes that go in. Because we know that the more we change, the more likely it is to break. Now, some other organizations don't seem to have this problem. A good example, I've heard many talks, even at SAP, from Amazon Web Services, and they put a change into production, on average, every 2.5 seconds. And we're struggling with quarterly releases. And it just seems a world apart. And the thing in the corner, ABAP is a special snowflake. It's saying there's no way we'll ever get to the stage 2.5 seconds. It's probably a little bit optimistic. All right? But maybe we can get it faster than quarterly releases or weekly releases or what have you. Maybe it's possible. And the things I'm talking about today are aimed at de-snowflaking the ABAP language, to put it one way. Now, the first aspect is more philosophical than technical. And you might wonder what it's got to do with the future of ABAP programming, but you have to bear with me on this one. Test-driven development is a reversal of the way we've always done things. And I'm going to go from right to left on this slide to indicate that how the whole backwardsness of everything. I've got that word anti-fragile there, which is a book which is not about programming as such. It's about things that get better the more stress you put on them. Things like, the example is muscles with bodybuilders. You can see I don't do much of that. Bodybuilders lift weights, it rips their muscles, and they become stronger as a result. In our case, being programmers, the stress that we face is the ever-increasing amount of changes. And traditionally, the more you change a big program, the weaker it gets, because you do workarounds and you add a bit of conditional logic here, and traditionally a global variable here, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And as time goes by, with every change, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, until it's like that Jenga games where you pull things out. And eventually you put up something on the top, and the whole thing falls to bits. And what often happens is a program gets so big and so fragile, you can't touch it. It's far, far too dangerous. I think so either rewrite it from scratch or live with it the way it is, because it's just so weak. We want to turn this on its head. All right? This is the aim of this test-driven development and automated testing. What we want is every time that you make a change, you can actually make it stronger. And the way around this is automated tests. This is something I've actually been doing for real test-driven development. I had to rewrite a huge monolithic program. I've been spending the last year doing it, and it only went live a couple of weeks ago. And I've been doing that by writing the test first. It has to do such and such. I write a test, say, does it do such and such? Well, no, it doesn't, because I haven't written the code yet. Obviously. And you write the code until that test passes. Then you've got an automated test of whatever it is. Then I add the next feature and the next feature and the next feature in that same way. And each time, when I add a new thing, because I've got tests for the previous ones, I know instantly if I've broken anything that exists. That's the whole premise of it. It's to, as I said, for a new one, it's supposed to make it bulletproof. For older programs, if every time you add to it, you write a test, you might be only testing 1% of it, but that's better than 0% of it. And then the next feature you add, you're testing 2% of it. So as I said, as time goes by, the more changes you make, the more of it's under test. So with every change, it gets stronger. That's the idea. And on the left is the tools, there they are, that are supplied by SAP to help you in this matter. For quite some years now, there's been ABAP Unit, which is the automated tests for the ABAP language. And in recent years, SAP have been adding, in recent releases of ABAP, more specialized tools, for example, for testing SQL queries in a database, which you couldn't really do before, and testing CDS views. And outside of the SAP, skip space in the user interface layer, which is now UI5. There's lots of open source unit testing frameworks to test that the user interface type works. However, you try and tell this to a manager. All right, this is what will happen. All right, because if you're going to be writing automated tests, there's no sugarcoating this. You've got to write twice the lines of code. And in theory, that means it would take twice as long to write. You tell a manager that, say, oh, this will take twice as long as a normal project, and you know how far you'll get most of the time. I said it'll cost twice as much, it'll be late, we'll all get sacked, we're all going to die. So don't bother, don't bother. So how in the world did I convince my management to actually let me go ahead with this crazy, bizarre experiment? And it was a pie chart over there. And what that represents is a real program that we wrote at my organization that the whole company hinges on. It's what the front end people at our concrete plants and quarries use all day, every day. Now, it was written in about 2 months, maybe less, just before go live. And it worked well enough. Maybe a little few bugs at the start, but okay. So 2 months to write. That was in 1999. Every week since then, we've put changes into it. All right, we've added new features, bug fixes. So what we have is 2 months of creation and then 20 years of changes. Now the question is, of those two, which one do you want to be stable? I'd like to think it's a big blue thing. And if it makes the building bit from 2 to 4 months, and that's the cost, but the benefit is 20 years of stability, rather than every single week when we put the changes into production, it breaks, and a load of unhappy users. If we could avoid that bit, avoid 20 years of frustration occurring on a weekly basis, then it's worth it. It's still a hard sell. In other languages, it's more or less the accepted way of doing it, but in ABAP, it's virtually unheard of. So as Malin said earlier, if you're doing something new and crazy, you've got to be a good salesperson. It's sad but true. It's not new and crazy in programming world. It's been done since 1944. It was the first ever instance of it being used by the top secret Rosies in America. And they use test-driven development to compute the best way to drop bombs on Germany. I tend to gloss that bit over when I'm giving this speech in German events. There we go. Anyway, moving along to these automated tests are part of what's called a pipeline. Now, to use a lovely buzzword here of continuous integration. Now that phrase means different things to different people, and you ask various different people, they'll give you various different answers. But the one thing that unites it all is, what this means is before putting code somewhere, moving from development to test, or it runs through a pipeline of automated checks. And in the Eclipse development environment, a guy called Andreas Gower has done a sort of simulation of this. This is a free plugin you can add to Eclipse. And what happens with this is as follows. Right. I start off, I change a few lines of code. Eclipse does a syntax checks constantly. So it tells you straight away if anything's wrong, which the normal SE80 environment doesn't really do. And then when you press the activate button, because you've changed your code, you press the activate button to bring it to life. First, obviously, it's going to save it to the database, but first, it does a whole bunch of things, all of which can be done manually. It's just doing them for you to save a few seconds. That's the idea. First of all, it does a pretty printer. At my organization, a load of people just don't bother with this. And you end up with code, half of it in uppercase, half of it in lowercase, all mixed. And it looks bad to me because I think if you don't care about the formatting of the code, you don't care about anything. and that's not good. So it does that for you. Then this is the ABAP test cockpit. That's what that stands for, ATC. It runs the extended check on your code to look for, do the static analysis, and anything that's wrong pops up in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, so you can drill into it to see what's happened. Then it'll run those automated unit tests, of which I described earlier, and again, if what you've changed has caused anything else to fail, that will appear in the bottom left-hand corner. And so, as I said, each of those steps can be done manually, but a lot of people don't bother because it's an effort. And if you download this and switch it on, you're sort of forcing yourself to do these tests. And it's what I call the shift left, where it's a common IT term where left means like at the start of the process. Traditionally, most testing happens in production after it's gone live. And it's good testing, it's really realistic. But what you really want is to test as early as possible, as left as possible, and you can't get more left than every single time you change a line of code. That's about as left as you can get. I'll probably get these slides afterwards, and right at the end of it, I've got a list of links to other things, and SAP's got a statement of direction. It's a bad, unfortunate acronym, really. A statement of direction on how SAP as an organization feels about continuous integration and what sort of pipelines they're envisaging in the future of ABAP development. It's too complicated to go into, and it changes every 10 minutes. So I won't dwell on it, but when you get the slides, that's a useful thing to look up. What's next? Oh, key cokes. The next part is what's been called the most exciting thing happening in SAP space, and it's not even driven by SAP. Other languages have used Git to manage their changes, and SAP's used the change and transport system, which we all know and love. A gentleman called Lars Havam Peterson wrote add into SAP called abapGit, which basically is a link between the code in SAP and GitHub, which is, as I said, used by other programmers other programming languages to store versions of programs. It's a bit of a radical change to how things are done in SAP. There's sort of three strands to this. I'll start off with a known quantity, and you can think of abapGit in some ways as a successor to SAPLink. And this is where a programmer over here is developing some sort of useful project like the ABAP to XLX or something of that ilk, and wants to give it to the world. I mean, we talked about that. Caring is sharing, sort of things. And these things tend to be non-proprietary. They're not something that's vital to your business. It's a useful generic tool. And you can use abapGit to upload it to a GitHub repository. And there's about 100 of these open source ABAP projects living there now. And I'd always advise people to have a look, because a lot of people don't even know they're there. And there's a load of free things, basically. It's like a child in a candy shop. You just have a look, could this be useful? The worst thing that could happen is none of it's useful. So the only way is up. You look at it and think, oh no, none of that's useful, but you never know. One of them might be really, really handy. And it goes onto a Git repository and then downloads to another SAP system. We've been able to do that with SAPLink for a while. This is just somewhat easier. But there's more. Now, I'm going to talk now about why you have these various Git repositories. Now, people who program in other languages, when I give this speech, they say, why are you stating these obvious concepts? And when I talk to ABAPers, they look at me like, what in the world are you on about? So I'm trying to bridge that gap here. The problem with SAP, as we know, is that you cannot have two people changing an object at the same time. Right? It just doesn't work like that. Once you start changing it, it's locked. So the scenario, I talked about the scenario rather than pointing at all these smiley faces bouncing up and down. What tends to happen is you've got this project. All right? So I've got my working code. Right? Little green man means he means he's happy. Everything's fine. This is his starting state. Everything's working perfectly. Lovely. All right. Then you have a big project starting. You start changing a whole bunch of objects. I don't know, let's just say 30 or 40 different classes and functions and this and that, and I change them all. I keep changing them all. And 6 months in, I've barely changed half 100 things on part of my project. I don't know if it works or not. Hopefully I'm testing it, but it doesn't matter because it's not in production yet. It's only in development. I'm changing it every day. Then disaster strikes. Right? For whatever reason, the thing you're changing, it stops working in production. Oh dear, the whole company is grinding to a halt. We need an emergency fix. Oh dear, I've changed it all. I can't just make a one-line fix because I've got all these changes. What do I do? Right. Traditionally, you sort of roll it all back. Make your one-line fix and put that in, or have a whole separate SAP system for production support. Make the change there and shove it in. Lovely. Neither are perfect. Having a different SAP system costs a load of money. And rolling it all back, though it can be done, is a pain. So how it works with having it in a Git repository is you have branches. And you always keep your main branch, the happy smiley face. A main branch is something you know works. You're 100% certain that it's fine. And when disaster strikes, you put your happy smiley face back in development. He's still there. The project, you haven't lost anything. You've just moved your good state back into development. You make your fix until it's happy again, until production's working. It's good. Then the main branch is all happy and smiley. You merge your fix into the project branch, and then poof, all your project changes are back in development again. And you can finish it off. And once your lovely new project goes live, it's a green, happy, smiley face again. That goes back into the main branch, and the whole process starts once again. As I was saying with this problem, none of this is new as such because you could do it before by other ways. It's just an easier, faster way to do it. And as I said, it's not even a radical new concept. When I talk about these things at work, they think I've invented them. But as I say, people who program in JavaScript or something, it's been doing that way for donkey's years. Righty-ho. Now is the time to talk a bit about ABAP, because since ABAP was in the title of this presentation, and I haven't mentioned it yet, it had to come along sooner or later. And I just want to talk a little bit about the history of ABAP. The main change came in the year 2000, when the name of ABAP changed to ABAP Objects because they had object-oriented programming you were able to do for the first time. 19 years on, most people still don't use it, but nonetheless, it's been available all that time. That's the point. But then, really, for a 12-year period, nothing much happened in the ABAP world. The version that was in 2000, it didn't change very much, which led a lot of people to think that, well, SAP haven't changed it for like 10 or 11 years, so it's dying. Have they given up on it? Happily, in 2013, SAP woke up to themselves and put a whole bunch of major changes in. The so-called inline declarations and some of the half-arsed functional programming type things. But anyway, it was all useful stuff, and it enabled you to write your programs, if done well, with about half the lines of code that you could previously, thus making them like shorter, hopefully easier to understand, hopefully more maintainable. That was a big change in 2013. Then the next few releases, every year or so, it was minor extra things. You might have one useful thing, like, as I mentioned, the SQL automated test framework, say. One useful thing, but nothing really dramatic. And then, you can see at this point, suddenly everything goes bananas. Instead of one release of ABAP every 2 or 3 years, suddenly it's every 3 months. One of those little things is only 2 months long. Example. Now the changes to ABAP are coming thick and fast, shall we say. And the changes are not minor as well. These changes are all for S/4HANA, of course. And the ABAP in the cloud, which we'll talk about in a minute, is the one that gets them every 3 months, and the on-premise version will get like a bundle of them every year. The last version of ABAP came out about 6 or 7 days ago, just as an example of that it's not minor changes that happen. For any ABAP programmers in the room, I don't usually like having many words on slides. I usually have pictures and people have to guess what I mean. Because if you have text on it, people will read it. And if they're reading it, they're not listening to you. It's the way it goes. But this point here is that they came out in a latest version of ABAP. They're doing something which I think they should have been doing for a long, long time. As in a completely, I've got these balls, you might wonder, they're notes to me, because I often look at a slide and I think, what was I on about? So I have little notes to myself, and so I do it in order. The first thing is this. I've got, again, a link at the end of the slides to a set of guidelines for ABAP that came out recently called Clean ABAP, based on the book Clean Code by Robert Martin. And I'd advise any ABAP programmer who hasn't heard of this as yet to have a look at that, because it's fantastic. It's applying the principles, again, that have been used in Java and over the past, and doing ABAP-specific examples. That's irrelevant, really, but I just thought I'd mention it. The second one is, I said about the fact that in the higher versions of ABAP, they're finally getting rid of some of the old, unstable constructs. A good example is a statics, which is global variables, really. And the less of them you have, the better in life. And my personal favourite of statements that are getting obsolete is form and end form. I won't miss them particularly. But the most important thing is it'll start as warnings, and then presumably in much higher releases they'll become errors. But the one that's becoming a syntax error for the start is the external perform, which is perform ABC in program XYZ if found. I've always hated this. It's the most unstable thing in the world. And where I work, they're everywhere. Nonetheless, so I'm very, very, very glad to hear that they're getting rid of them. And you might wonder what the Spice Girls are doing, hiding at the bottom of this slide. And the point I'd say is these keywords, they're on their way out. They're going to die. If you're using them, if you want to use them in a new code you're writing today, stop right now. Thank you very much. Right, that's what I'm going to say. Right. Now, going on to the reason that ABAP's evolving so fast is in recent years, I think, well, it could be like 13 months ago now, SAP hired 100 graduates just purely to work full-time on the development of the ABAP language, and specifically something called the RESTful ABAP Programming Model. Now, at the moment, there's 3 possible programming models you could use when developing an application in ABAP. One at the top is the one that we know and love, what you could call a freestyle approach. You read your data from tables. Right? You process that data by doing absolutely anything you want. Right? And at the end, it comes out in the SAP GUI. That's been that way for a long time. The current recommended approach from SAP is the SAP for Fiori programming model, where instead of reading from a table, you read from a CDS view. Use something called the Business Object Processing Framework for transactional behavior, actions and user commands and things. The transaction SEGW to create a service, which can then be consumed by the user interface, which is UI5. Okay, this is, again, I've been trying to explain this to people at work, and I haven't quite got through yet, and it's just as well, because they haven't even heard of BOPF, and it's already obsolete. That is the SEGW. It's the way with IT, really. By the time you discover something, this is interesting. Oh, no, don't use that. That's so 10 minutes ago. What SAP now are going to be pushing is a so-called RESTful ABAP Programming Model, which is the same in a way, but it's a bit more code-based. I'll give you an actual example of this. Still using CDS views. They're the heart of SAP's direction. That's what they want to use to control data and even the user interface. But instead of a specialized framework for transactional behavior, you code classes. And again, it's easier to create the service to connect to your to UI5. We won't be able to read this because it's all gobbledygook, but the point I'm making is it's all code based. That's the point I'm making here. This is this is a class where you have an entity. Of course, my entities are always monsters because my books are about monsters and my business object is always a monster. And so I have a special type of class, which is a for behavior of. And that's a new thing. That was never in the ABAP language before. It's a special type of class. You create a behavior definition saying what sort of things it can do. And it's obviously got the create, update things, and specialized commands. In the case of a monster, it can howl at the moon. That's business objects can do different things. You define the behavior, and then you code that behavior. That's the important bit, and the syntax is quite different than anything that's gone before. That's something well worth noting. Right, moving on. At the moment, this is only available in the so-called ABAP in the cloud. Now, it is no secret that SAP wants every single one of their customers, to move on to S/4HANA and preferably in the cloud. Yet, as of a few months ago, of all the people who have gone on to S/4HANA, only 109 of them have actually gone to the cloud version, and the other 3,000 have all gone on-premise. And SAP often wonder, why is this? And I would say a lot of people think if I go to the cloud, it's a shared code base, I lose all my Z stuff. I lose 20 years of Z adaptations. Things, and it's a valid worry. So, how does ABAP in the cloud come into this? Well, it works, and Graham Robinson hates me, he's a other mentor, hates me saying this. It's as if you have two databases. You don't really, but it's like you do. In one of them lives everything SAP standard. The standard SAP programs, the standard SAP code, and the other database lives all your Z stuff. Only any of your Z tables and your Z code. And there's a clear separation between the two. That's the idea. And so you program in here, and it goes into your Z stuff. SAP program however they want, and it goes into their one. So lovely. Great, they've solved the problem. No problem at all. You can go to into cloud and keep all your Z stuff. Of course you can. Oh no, actually you can't. Here's the problem. Right? In our current Z code, we use anything we feel like. If you find a SAP function module or data element or something, you can use it. Just use it. No problem whatsoever. Even though most function modules aren't released. Doesn't matter, you can use them. In the ABAP in the cloud, sadly, they've got a little list of whitelisted programs or classes, and I say a little list, I mean a little list. Right? And you run past, you just cut and paste your Z code in there, and you'll get syntax errors all over the place. So you can't use this function, you can't use that, you can't use this data element even. So it's not as easy as you might think. The second bit with the wall is that if I try and use, in my code, if I refer to a standard SAP table, like KNA1 or VBAK, say, it'll say, what is that? And give you an error, because it doesn't know. It doesn't know about the SAP standard tables. The only way your code in the ABAP in the cloud can talk to the SAP standard is through the wall, which is a set of, again, whitelisted APIs and functions which communicate with the SAP standard system. And the idea of that is that you can upgrade your Z code, and SAP can upgrade their system completely independently, because they're talking through a wall that doesn't change. So the idea is it makes it more stable than if you were, saying, putting in enhancements or modifications or to the standard SAP code. That's the idea. It's supposed to make it stronger. Right. The conclusion. This is how these three seemingly disparate things, being test-driven development, abapGit, and the changes to ABAP itself, how they all fit together. Okay, on the left, we have three different programmers. Traditionally, they all programmed in the same SAP development system. Right. SAP's grand vision for the future, and I would stress it's just a vision at the moment. I know they've got a pilot going on inside SAP, but it's just a vision. Their plan is to move more like other languages, where people develop locally on their own machine. Hence, in ABAP in the cloud, you've got your own development system, as it were, and all three can work on the same program at once. Then you have to have some sort of control when you're merging it into your actual SAP system. When one of these programmers is ready to do their changes, there has to be some sort of control, and this is where the test-driven development and continuous integration pipeline comes into play. There's got to be a series of tests that's run before it can be judged good enough to go into your SAP system. And the idea being that by the time it gets here, which could be your development system, it's already gone through a whole heap of tests, both locally on people's ABAP systems, and then through a centralized system. And say we've got GitHub sitting in the middle with various versions of the programs. And that, in a nutshell, is how it's supposed to look. As I said, it's just a plan at the moment, because it's quite a radical change from how it's always been done. But the idea, the aim of the game, is to make things more robust and hopefully speed up the rate of change. To make it can change faster with less risk. That's the idea. Well, shameless plug here, of course. And some lucky people will be getting copies of my book today in the raffle, which is all good. I just thought I'd mention it, and that basically brings me to the Q&A section. That's a big screen. You've got a box.
Thank you. Okay. It's connected to all of your kind of talks, primarily because you talk about the future. One of the things that our customers, because our customers uses SAP, say it takes 10 years to learn the system. So how far along in the future is the plans, and is SAP?
Wow, this is a very good question. As I said, it's more than just a pipe dream, what they're doing. Because of what I've talked about, some of it's there already, such as the test-driven development tools. They've been there for a while, and there's more of them coming out. The RESTful ABAP in the cloud is live. It's actually got real customers, such as Lego, as I understand it, actually using it. In my opinion, that's far too early, because it's not ready yet. But nonetheless, it means SAP's got really good salesmen. If they can convince someone to go live with something that isn't ready, that's fantastic. So ABAP, it's there. I would say it needs another 4 versions, perhaps, before it's even anywhere near complete. There's still a load of gaps, and errors is too strong a word. Unusual behavior, that's a better way to put it. So it's there. At the moment, the vision of everyone developing on their own system is probably a fair way off, because it would be really expensive. At the moment, it's probably what SAP are charging for it is astronomical. Yeah. And I think they need to find a way to do it in a cheaper way before it will get mass adoption. Now, all the building blocks are already there. It's just not ready yet. And as to when it will all be ready, could be 2 years, could be 5, but it's coming. They're not going. I don't think they're going back on this. I think it's definite. And as for taking 10 years to learn the system, we'll probably stay the same.
How can we make sure that changes?
I'm still learning things all the time.
Can you toss it to Julia?
That was a good game.
Are you okay?
Quick technical. Can you hear me? I hope so. You mentioned about the deprecate. The first time they introduced deprecation, some statements will be deprecated.
Yes, indeed.
And I remember we had obsolete statements. So what's the difference between both?
Well, these deprecated ones, they're not going to be. They're probably it's more a signal. They're going to be removed. In the past, backward compatibility was everything at SAP. They prided themselves on it. It will run. It will run back on version 3. It doesn't matter. We'll keep all your old logical databases and static statements and things. This is the first time they've sort of they've said something's obsolete. I don't use it, but you can still use it without any fear whatsoever. They're raising a red warning flag. At long last, we are going to get rid of this. In this version, it'll be a syntax, it'll be like a yellow warning. In the next one, it'll be red. And the next one is a syntax error. That's the idea. And they're giving you notice, as it were. Mm-hmm. This building will be demolished. That's the idea.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Time for one more if there are something. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. Cheers.